Hi, everybody. So good to be here. We are in the Mondays. We are in the Mondays today. Today, we are starting a new week of lunch therapy, and it's so great to be here. And I want to take in a breath. So let's do it. 1, 2, 3. And we're breathing, or we're holding our breath. And then we're letting it out. As a lot of you know, this is the way we start our show. 3 breaths. Take it in. Take this opportunity. Let it out. You will feel better. Breath is life. Hoy, Neil, Ganell. 1 more breath. Let's do it. Hold it. Let it out. Thanks, Ganell, for being in the... All right. Yes. Viva España. Thanks, for both of you, for being in the Twitch room. Last time in the Twitch room, we had some hater person in there just spewing hate. Probably just a kid having fun. But it's great to see some positive energy in the chat room, in Twitch, because I love Twitch. I aspire to be a Twitcher. It's great to see all of you here, and we're gonna start the day off right with an American Eagle live camera. Let's see what the American Eagles are doing. Oh, look at that! So that is a live cam of an eagle in a nest, live bald eagle cam. I invite you to check this out. It's the NEFL-PTZ cam number 1. I just think it's extraordinary. Live cams on YouTube are so much fun because you just can pop in there and see what's going on anywhere in the world, all over the world. Sometimes I will go to Hawaii and just watch the waves. It's a good way to relax. Good way to relax if you feel like the world's getting crazy. Just drop in on a little live cam. Another thing that one of our viewers found that is quite funny. Usually we don't have the coronavirus stuff on here, but this is just kind of a funny thing this guy Ken Elder put together, and I invite you to take a look at it on YouTube. It is a horse race of coronavirus news. So I'm gonna show like a little bit of it, in the beginning, maybe the end. Have you guys check it out later.
And they're off. Out of the gate, it's coronavirus, followed closely behind by Wuhan-style lockdown. On the outside, it's global pandemic working hard against Flatten the Curve. Social distancing got off to a slow start, but he's now neck and neck with Flatten the Curve. On the inside, it's just
it is kind of like what it's like, right?
The quarter pole,
watching the news. Here they come around the bend.
And down the stretch they come. It's social distancing and economic shutdown now, neck and neck. I don't believe it. Dr. Fauci is trying to keep pace, and with 1 furlong to go, it's economic shutdown, social distancing, and Dr. Fauci. And as they come to the wire, it's... Oh.
Okay, so I'm going to have to let you guys look at that to see who won. And we're going to have some eagles coming into our life here and there because the eagle sounds. The eagles fly with the dove. So you got to remember that. If you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with, right? Love the one you're with. Okay, so a lot of you know that. Let's see what's going on in the chat room here. Oh yeah, that the eagle is doing that thing that our cat does with the feet pressing down. I guess all animals. It's interesting as you start looking at animals, they become more and more alike, and less different. They kind of behave in the same ways. You notice that, and if you watch that tiger show with the tigers, that they act just like gigantic house cats, and I guess bald eagles do too. hey, am I going to get kicked off Facebook for this? For the Eagles, I don't think so because it's just live. It's just live streaming. I think when we got into trouble last time, it's because I showed somebody like some hummingbirds in a fountain that someone had recorded, and yeah. So let's see. Should I wear a mask? Should I win this thing? Speaking of winning this thing, the race, I guess. I love the way the comments come into me later, so I can kind of reference them, and usually I'm wrong. But so I back to what I was saying is, I'm a nonprofit comedian entertainer these days because there's very little opportunity out there for stand-up comedians. So that's why we're on the internet. Before this whole thing happened, though, I was looking for new venues, and I've been one of my, I guess, idols is Eddie Izzard. I don't know if you guys like Eddie Izzard, but check him out. He's super good. And he started out as a street performer, and I'm always interested in the busking. Mary Marks was betting on Dr. Fauci. So I always wanted to be a street, I thought maybe I could be a street performer, and I, missed an opportunity when I was younger to do some musical busking, which is playing music in the streets, whether people like it or not. And so I thought, hey, since I'm a stand-up comedian, maybe I should do some comedy busking, take my microphone, this microphone, out to Venice Beach and do some comedy busking. And one of the things that Eddie Izzard said about street performing is it's not so much that people just continually walk by, which is what happens. When you start doing street performing, you think, oh, there's going to be a big crowd that's going to form because I'm doing such wonderful things. But he said most of the time they just walk by, He said the worst thing, though, is when there's just like one kid. And you're out there performing, and then just the one kid is standing there just looking at you. And you're trying to make the kid laugh. And you're doing everything you can, and you're falling over, and you're standing on one leg, and you're making cornflakes disappear, and the kid just walks away. So when I did my comedy busking, there was a lot of walking by, but I did get one fan. I got a fan, and I'm going to play the video here of me comedy busking on Venice Beach. My parents were from Pittsburgh, and so we always went to Pittsburgh. When there was a vacation, we would go to Pittsburgh. All the other kids, they would go to places like Cabo or Vail, Colorado or something like that, and we would just go to Pittsburgh. And back then, Pittsburgh was like going back in time. It was like if you had an old photograph and you just like stepped into the old photograph, and that was Pittsburgh. There was so much coal in the air that it was like it was black and white. It was like black and white. And so it was, when you went to Cabo, you came back with a tan, but when you went to Pittsburgh, you came back with black lung. You ever been to Pittsburgh? Yeah, Pittsburgh. In Pittsburgh, they have like their own language. They say stuff like, let's go downtown, Giant Eagle, and get ourselves some jumbo in that. Let's go downtown to the Giant Eagle, get some jumbo in that. And that means, it's like in the South when they say, y'all want to go out on the porch and have some sweet tea? They say, you just want to go downtown to Giant Eagle, get some jumbo in that? You've been a great audience.
I've been out here too long.
You've been a really, really good audience. I really appreciate it.
Bring in the crowd.
So that's how that went. That guy was really, actually pretty fun. There was a point where he actually got up there and did some comedy himself. And that's the fun of doing street performing, is you just never know what's going to happen. And that's why it intrigues me. I also did some comedy about Pittsburgh, and I love Pittsburgh. A lot of my relatives are from Pittsburgh. My aunt Jean watches the show. My Aunt Ruth watches the show. Jean is from Pittsburgh. She lives in D.C. now. Aunt Ruth still lives in Pittsburgh. My Aunt Phoebe, Uncle Tom, everybody. It's just I just love Pittsburgh. Huge fan of Pittsburgh, but I do like to poke fun at it because it's fun, right? It's a fun place. It's a fun place that a lot of people haven't been, but people from there are like, if you're from Pittsburgh, you are a serious lover of Pittsburgh and the Steelers and the Pirates and all that stuff. Yeah, next time I'll have a 2-drink minimum. I don't know. Is a 40 one drink? Can't tell really. All right, so now we're going to move on to the next part of the show today, which is going to be, we're going to go back to our Alaska story. A lot of you have been following the saga of my experience in Alaska. It's a coming-of-age story that just keeps coming. Oh, yeah, Greg Warla, he's been to Pittsburgh. He knows about Pittsburgh. Yeah, obviously we used to vacation in Pittsburgh when I was a kid. And, it's still a lot the same when I go back there, which is cool. Because everything changes so much these days. One of the things that I was talking to my dad the other day, and one of the things that I noticed was his generation is the generation, I feel like it's the generation of don't change anything. The baby boomers, they just don't want anything to change. They want everything to stay the same. And then our generation, things started like kind of falling apart. I'm Generation X. Things started kind of, like in the 50s, it was like things were going great. Everybody had a house. There was a middle class. Everything seemed like it was going all in the right direction. And so I think that generation, which their parents came out of the Great Depression, they were like, hey, things are going really well. Let's not change it. Let's not change anything. And, they got past a lot of crap, World War II, World War I, all that stuff. And now all of a sudden it was the land of prosperity, the United States. And they thought, we can't change anything. And you're in trouble when you try and keep things exactly the same, because anybody knows after living here for a while that everything changes. Greg Wurtela likes sandwiches. He knows his sandwiches. But even sandwiches change. Although, I used to be a huge fan of this meatloaf sandwich that's in Pioneer Square. There was a place in Pioneer Square when I was a kid where you could go and you could get the best darn meatloaf sandwich. I don't know if Greg knows what that place is called. Do you, Greg? It was a place in Pioneer Square. It was called like Old Town or something like that. Super good sandwiches. And I thought, that's gone. That's totally gone now. That can't still be around. And the reason the meatloaf sandwiches were so good, I don't know what it was, but they used to spread the mayonnaise with a huge knife. And they were just, I don't know. I'm not even a huge fan of meatloaf sandwiches, let me tell you, but there. Greg Orla says Seattle scares me. Yeah, he's afraid. He lives out there in Edmonds, so I think he lives in Edmonds. Seattle's very frightening. But anyway, so now that place, I find out my parents were telling me they got sandwiches from there. They drove down there with their masks on and got their sandwiches, but it's not in Pioneer Square anymore. So if anybody can tell me the name of that, Bakeman's is what Ganell says. Oh, Mary says sounds good right now, yeah. And Ganell says Bakeman's. I don't think it's Bakeman's. It sounds good. Matt Wright says Edmonds is frightening if you're 16. I don't know what it means, but I'm sure that Greg is well past 16. Thank God. So I'm going to now go into the Alaska story. I'm going to do a little recap last week on Joel versus Alaska. We've been talking about Alaska. I was trying to figure out why I went to Alaska. Kind of got scared to go, and then I kind of didn't apply for the job, and then I got the job, and then I almost got kicked out of college. Doug O'Donnell and I were getting on a plane to go to Alaska. And we were sort of ill-equipped. Doug had lived in Germany for a while. He was so depressed that he would go buy these little cakes and eat the whole thing. So you know that kind of anxiety that you get when you're sort of out of your element. We get on an Alaska Airlines, just a jet. It was a chartered jet. Really feeling pretty special, you know, that we're in this chartered jet. We're going up to Alaska. We sat in first class. I had never sat in first class before. A huge bag of M&Ms. We thought, well, when we get to the airport in Alaska, we'll go to the cocktail lounge. You know, I happen to be very partial to amaretto sours. It tastes a little like a maraschino cherry. We landed on the runway, and we were waiting in first class for them to open up the door so that we can get out on the jetway. Kind of high on M&Ms. You know, there was that guy who murdered people because he ate too many Twinkies. But we were not, you know, obviously not murderers. Everybody in the plane was gone. They went out the back. They just were standing on the runway. All the other Alaska goers are out there. Where's the cocktail lounge? There isn't one. Oh, you guys are first. And he points over to this plane. It's like a little, like Cessna. You're first. Wow, we're some special people. We get to go first. The white glove treatment. Wow, we got to go ahead of all these people. I think they were actually sending us to the plane just to see if it could take off. The plane testers. Red-headed guy with a big red beard, very large, hunched over the controls of this aircraft. There is not a lot of runway. At the end of the runway, there's just water. And the propellers go, and that big guy's hunched over there. This doesn't sound like it. It's like you're in a Volkswagen Bug from 1965. It's like a wilding from Game of Thrones. Exactly. We're not going to make it. It doesn't seem like it's going fast enough to lift off. The end of the runway is coming. It's coming. And there's just water out there. At the last second, somehow he pulls back on the controls and we go up into the sky. And it was like a mirror. I thought I was going to die that day. There's only one other time that I was in an airplane that I got that feeling. It was in Venezuela. My wife, Kamala, and her mom, Cessna like that. They're kind of held together by baling wire and some wishes and hopes and dreams. Guy in there who had a mustache, an older guy, probably had been flying these things his entire life. Amazon jungle. As he started letting my mother-in-law drive the plane. That I really got the adrenaline, full body adrenaline rush. In Alaska, I was just sort of like, wow, thank God we got up here in the sky. It's incredible, really, up in the sky like this. Started pointing around down on the ground. Who's Jim? Which one's Jim? That's just the wreckage where Jim, well, where's Jim? Go, you can see his remains down there somewhere. Yeah, it was just crashed planes. And the thing's, it's not like a steady, like, jet thing. It's like, And finally he points down and he goes, there it is, like double-wide trailers down there and maybe a warehouse. We had planned, when we get to our house or our apartment, get some beers at the supermarket. But what he pointed out was not really like a town. And he starts heading in towards it. We're going in. Okay. All right. So that's what happened last week. It's a little too much of a synopsis, I think. Plus, it probably looks like it's buffering. And that gives us a lot of PTSD from Spectrum, I think, from when we used to have Spectrum. But Mary Marks, yeah, it was pretty scary stuff. Okay, so now I'm in Alaska. Doug and I are there. I'm my editor, Nell. I am my editor. I am my own editor. Kamala Lopez has officially retired the phrase, these uncertain times. I like that. We never say these uncertain times on this show. And, oh, good. It was intentional. I thought I was stroking out. Okay, so no more last week. We're going to cancel the last week on lunch therapy procedure because clearly that's giving everybody a seizure. So let's talk about this week on lunch therapy. This week I'm in Alaska. Doug and I are there. And we decide, there's no alcohol at this place. We don't know what to do. We're completely out of our element. And we go to work the next day. And so then we actually go to work in a freezer. And there's basically two places where you can work. There's the freezer, which seems like a horrible idea if you're living in Alaska to then work in a freezer. But that's where Doug is. So I'm like, I'm glad I'm not in there. And where I was a place called the Egg House. The Egg House. And so apparently in there, all the pink salmon, there's different types of salmon. Who knew there were different types of salmon? But the pink salmon come in and you extract the eggs out of the salmon. And that's how you get salmon roe, they call it, salmon roe. I don't know if that's like caviar. I guess it's a little like caviar. Not really the thing that I like to eat, but apparently a lot of people like it. So we're up there in Alaska. We have absolutely no idea what we're doing. We probably should have studied. We probably should have learned how to build a fire. We probably should have done something. All I could do was call my mom and really, whine as a bald eagle flew by. We're like, so I go the next day and I'm like, I got to get into the freezer. I got to get into the freezer because I found out that's where all the cool kids are. That's where the cool kids are. And I guess the Egg House is not as cool these historic days. So we're in, I decide, this is what I decide to do. This is the way I used to behave. And maybe it's a good way to behave. I didn't want to be in the Egg House. I wanted to be in the freezer. So what did I do? I just showed up at the freezer. And I was just like, I'm here. And while they're handing out all the gear for everybody to work there, I just got my gear. And by the time they figured it out, I already had a job. And I was already making myself useful. So they're like, just keep them here. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I made that decision because what happened that season was there were no pink salmon. I don't know where the pink salmon were. They had decided to go off to Hawaii on vacation or something. Or maybe they were like, screw that. I'm not giving my eggs to this trailer park. I'm getting the hell out of here. So there were no pink salmon there at all. And so they just had to shut down the Egg House. The Egg House was done within like 2 weeks. They all went home. That's the way they treated people at this place is they just, they didn't care. You were basically a tool. So I was a tool. And another thing I didn't realize is you had to work your way up some kind of a ladder in this place, like a fish ladder. You had to start at the bottom. Who knew? I thought we were getting the white glove treatment, but no. Then they put us in all this rain gear, and I put on my rain gear, and my friend Doug looks at me, and he's like, and it was the largest one I could get, and my friend looks at me and he goes, "Wow, you got the biggest rain gear possible, and it's too tight." And I started to get kind of panicked, like, well, because I was afraid they were going to send me home for being too large. I know. How did I grow up next to Puget Sound and not know there were different types of salmon? That's how privileged I was. Or not privileged, I don't know. But yeah, what are the different types of salmon? There's the coho or silver salmon, as they call it. There's the king salmon, which is the really large salmon. There's the sockeye salmon. Sockeye? How am I doing, Greg? There's the chum, they used to call it, which is, I don't know. I'm trying, reaching back. So there's all the different salmons. I had no idea. But now I'm seeing like 30,000 of them coming in every day. 30,000 was a lot. They called that a shitload. That was like the technical term for a lot of fish. And, so this is the pecking order. You basically had the Slimers. The Slimers were the guys that had to stand in this one area where water poured down, and they basically cleaned the fish. They cleaned all the what they called the bloodline out of there. Tell me if this is getting too graphic, but we had to take this bloodline out of the back of the fish, and there was no place to put it. So you just kind of put it on your friend. So your friend would be like covered with blood. Jupiter salmon. There's no such thing as a Jupiter salmon. No, there's not. It's not a thing. So then in these historic times, we have to all know the different types of salmon. And Neil, you better figure it out. Get out your Wikipedia. Back then, I didn't have Wikipedia or anything to look it up, but so I was a slimer. Water's pouring down on me the entire day, and I'm just trying not to get frostbite. And the only way not to get frostbite is if you put on the gloves in a particular way. And it was like a puzzle. No one would tell you how to put the gloves on, but you had to put it on in a particular way. You had to put a cotton glove on, and then you had to put a rubber glove on, but the rubber glove couldn't be too tight, and then you had to put a goalie glove on top of that so that you could rip the bloodline out and throw it on your friend. But if you wore too tight of a glove, your circulation would cut off, and eventually your hand would fall off. So I decided I didn't want to be a slimer anymore, right? I decided that I wanted to be sliming people with fish bloodlines is not okay. Friends do not do that to each other. I just want to say one other thing. You're probably wondering what was the most prestigious job in the freezer in Alaska. What did you aspire to be? And Doug was kind of taking to this Alaska thing. I mean, here's a picture of Doug in front of what we called the Maytag machine. And here he is with a big old fish. And behind him is in the area to his left is where the slimers would be. And that's where the water would come down. And then behind him to his right was what they called the Maytag machine. So Doug had aspirations, not to be the top tier, but he had aspirations to get out of the sliming thing. And so he eventually became what they called the Maytag man. And the Maytag man could take a fish and he could throw it through that machine, but he could throw it through perfectly so that it would shoot through there and not fall out of the machine. So he became that. But the top dogs in this place were the butchers. Yeah, kind of scary place. They were butchers. So they were men and women, and they had gigantic forearms and very sharp knives. Those were the butchers. And everybody kind of aspired to be a butcher because they were cool somehow. They walked around like they owned the place. They had been there many times, so they'd been there many seasons. So they were very seasoned. They had giant forearms, and they would sharpen their knives in a particular way on a stone where they'd do this cool, like, rotating action. And then to test the knife, they put it in their hair, and they just kind of see if, I don't know, they get a very, like, a particular kind of feeling when they did it. One time, however, the entire place stopped, and one of the butchers had a fish, and he bit the head off of the fish. And that was like, whoa, dude, that's just gnarly. Why are you doing that? And the weird thing about it is when he bit the head off the fish, his front tooth popped out. Just popped out. And it was that kind of experience where everybody's like, wow, oh, and he's like, what? Oh, that's the experience that he got. It's like, we were like, wow, oh, and then his mouth was bleeding. Anyway, it was not a good experience for any of us. Similar to the recap from last week with the terrible editing that went on in that fiasco. So we've run out of time. So there I am, being a slimer, aspirations to do something else, cannot be a butcher because you have to be there for a long time to do that. But I got to get out of the sliming because it's disgusting, it's cold, and you're working 20 hours a day standing underneath water. That's the other thing I didn't realize going to Alaska. I didn't realize that you were going to work 20 hours a day doing repetitive motion over and over and over again. It's a terrible thing. But I learned. What did I learn? I learned that be careful what you ask for, right? And, in these trying times, these weird times, these historic days in these historic days, you got to learn as much as possible. And you got to learn from your mistakes. And the world has got to learn from their mistakes. And so thank you so much for being here. We're going to go out on this Thai woman named Melinda Herman. And she is singing Let It Be. And I will see you all tomorrow for lunch therapy.